All right, I'm back for the day, right? We're just sitting here thinking, right? And I was just thinking to myself, like, what's the greatest gift that one is given by God, right? Outside of life, right? And I don't think a lot of people really take that into deep thought, right? So, in my meditative deep thought state, right? I got to thinking, right? Is it food? Is it money? Is it power? Right? And don't get me wrong, all those things are essential in a civilized society, right? But what if we go farther back, right? Because if you study all the ancient texts, the scriptures from your Bible, your Quran, your pyramid texts, and all the other various things that was left by the ancestors to guide us or bring us closer to God, right? When you look past all of those things, right? When you get down to the bare essentials, right? When you get down to just us existing, right? And you study religion, theology, you study mythology, you study all those things, right? The further we get back, we get a kind of like clue, right? And it shows a trail, right? Up until modern times. And my personal opinion is the greatest gift that God gave humanity and mankind was actually something that we all take for granted, right? But if you look all around, it's everywhere. You get on social media, it's there. You step outside your house, it's there. If you're in your room, it's there. It's everything. It's the second greatest thing from nature, right? And without it, the world that we know would not exist. Only nature would exist, right? And that gift is imagination. Just go back, just imagine in your mind, right? Before civilization, before work, before a lot of things, right? Because this one thing, imagination, has spawned everything: culture, art, science, right? But it all just started as something as simple as you laying in the grass. You don't have a care in the world. There's no work, there's no pressure. And it's a nice, sunny, beautiful day. And you're in a mellow or something like that where there's plenty of grass, right? Clear sky up above. And you just lay down. And you look up at the sky. And you start looking at Heaven's movie, right? And where you can see where mankind got the ideal of actually making movies in the silver screen. As we know, silver screen, the moon, it's in the sky, right? So you look up at the sky and you see the clouds. And it might be a little light breeze, right? Just enough to have the clouds move. And if you tap in long enough, you can see God's movie, right? The clouds start taking forms, it starts taking shifts, different sizes, right? And then your imagination is sparked. You look at one cloud, you say, hey, the cloud looks like a horse. Now we can understand the root origins of certain mythologies, like say Greek mythology and the winged horse Pegasus, right? And it went so far, and once that imagination was ignited, it caused a fire inside of the mind, inside of the consciousness, right? And then we could see where the origins of the seed of mythology. Once someone looked up at the sky and said, wow, that right there looks like a hunter, looks like a bear, right? And then with that, man became so intrigued with the sky that at nighttime, he looked up and seen the star constellations. It started seeing hunters, starting seeing things in his reality, and his reality kids start kissing the sky. And with that came stories, which we know as mythology. From mythology, it morphed into religion. From religion, it morphed into philosophy. From philosophy, it morphed into science. And we're still on that imagination plane. Without imagination, there would be nothing other than nature itself. There would be no cars. There would be no airplanes. There would be no phones. There would be anything that you know and love. There would be nothing without imagination. But I'm here also to warn you. There are elements that have been existing for thousands and thousands of years that detest the very nature of imagination, that wants to subdue imagination, that wants to control imagination, not their own imagination. You're supposed to control your imagination. This is where your artistic gifts come in at. But there are those that understand imagination and the power of imagination, and how through imagination you can change your narrative. You can change a lot of things, right? So they want to lock that imagination up. And unfortunately, there are millions of people on this planet who have allowed this power structure that has been existing for thousands of years to suppress their God-given imagination. And isn't it ironic that Jesus in the Bible said, in order to enter heaven, one must be like a child. Now, what does a child has in abundance but adults, very few adults have in abundance, right? And that is imagination. Proof of it, you can sit a child in a room, throw a few toys, quietly observe that child. That child will literally start showing you the diaphragm of life through his or her imagination. So imagination is very, very, very important. And we must be careful, because one of the ways that they use to control imagination, stunt imagination growth, is through programs, right? Now, we're not knocking programs, because programs are everywhere. Programs are in music. Programs are in movies, right? But we have to be careful, right? To not let the programs stunt our imagination or kill the imagination that's inside of us, because imagination is the actual ladder that leads us to the essence of God, right? So with that being said, look at one of the titles that we give God. We call God the Creator, right? When a person utilizes their imagination, what's the first thing they call themselves, especially in modern times, current time right now? I'm a content creator. See the root word, creator. And then we understand when we hear words like man is made in the image of God, right? So if I was to take, say, some clay and fashion it and do a very good job, man, say, right? And I ask you, I put it on a pedestal and I point to it and I ask you, I say, what is that? You're not going to say that's a ball of clay. You're going to say that's an apple, right? So even your mind bears witness to one imagination, and then it automatically associates imagination with creation, right? So we got to be careful, because me being an older man, I've been around for a long time, right? Some decades, right? Quite a few decades, right? And I'm noticing with the youth, right? A lot of youth lack imagination, right? And see, another thing about imagination can break you out of a lot of programs, right? So we see a lot of the youth, they dress the same, right? Granted, we dress the same too, right? But anybody from my age period can actually see the limitation culturally, right? You can even see it with rap music, right? During my time period, we had a colorful cornucopia of different rappers displayed different talents and different artistic fashions, right? Now, you hear it all the time. Everybody sound the same, right? But the lack of imagination is also causing many to become blind. And I give you a prime example. You know how many times I heard on social media and just out of regular people's mouth, oh, this entertainer has been cloned. Oh, they're cloning people. Well, they're partial right and then they're partial wrong, right? No one's taking these entertainers in some secret lab like Area 51 and experimenting and just zapping their conscious out of their bodies and putting a new conscious program in like there's some new synthetic human robot android infused with AI systems. Nah, that's so contrary to the truth. The truth of it is, you look at clones when you walk outside yourself, when you see a person who dress, talks, acts, and thinks like his favorite rapper or her favorite rapper, that person is a clone. So let's redefine what a clone is. A clone is a being that has, in certain degrees, some all the way, but has had the imagination process stunted, is just gone inside of that individual, right? Those are the reality of clones. And how is this done? It's done through programming, right? Now I'm gonna give you a major jewel, right? And that jewel is this. We're not trying to get rid of programs. I'm trying to hip you to something. And what I'm trying to hip you to, this jewel, is once you realize that the programs become your tools, whereas though you can program yourself, and versa, you just wanderously going from the world to and fro and just letting things just program you, right? And the programming game get really deep. There's a thing called subliminal suggestion, right? Years ago, I read a book, right? And it was on marketing, right? Commercials and things of that nature, right? And it had an interesting chapter on there, subliminal suggestion, right? And as I get like halfway in the book was like, oh, you remember the picture on the cover? Now let me describe the picture on the cover. It was a glass, presumably alcohol, right? And it had 3 ice cubes in there. It says, go back to the cover and take a detailed look at that glass. What do you see? Right? So after a while, a trained eye, you could see it had 3 letters, a letter to each ice cube. And the letter said SEX. It said sex, right? And then we go back into the book and the writer elaborated more on that in the subliminal suggestion, right? And it said it was very genius and brilliant from a marketing perspective, right? Because it was, you could barely see it unless you had a trained eye for it or somebody pointed it out, right? But here's the thing. The subconscious records everything, even things that you're not consciously aware of. And it says this was done that way so that it would tap into a primal mechanism inside of you. And that mechanism is the reproduction of life, which is a very strong drive amongst humans, right? Because it also ties into the laws of self-preservation and things of that nature, right? So I think that a lot of times we're not mindful of the detail that may be in the fabric of things, right? And we take things for granted. Now, to give you a little bit of motivation, I've been doing it for years. I decode movies, I decode music, I decode books, I decode artwork, right? And I'm here to tell you there are levels to this, there are tiers to it, there's a wealth of information. Now, some people might be like, man, I don't really care about it. But I'm going to tell you what, right? When you do become a neophyte and you get initiated in this thing of ours, right? You will understand that they serve as signs, right? It's the same way you're on a highway and you're driving. If you're not aware of the signs, if you're illiterate to certain levels to the signs, like prime example, you riding down the street or the highway and it tells you a certain speed limit, or you're riding down the street and you see the stop sign, but you're unaware that it's a stop sign, you don't know what the symbols mean and none of that, and you just keep going, what's going to happen, right? 9 times out of 10, something very tragic will happen, right? That's how it is in life. I remember seeing a movie. I can't recall the name of the movie, right? But during the time, it had a famous wrestler, right? I believe his name was Ronnie Piper, right? And in that movie, right, he played a person that was on the streets, right? You know, and he had a little riffraff about him. So he went in the house to do a burglary, right? And the people were there, but they had like a underground radio station in one of the rooms, and he was able to get in the house, and he went into the basement, I believe he was, and seen all of these boxes. And he looked inside the boxes, it was these glasses, right? And he just looked real quick, he grabbed a box, and he left the house, right? So as he get outside a few blocks away, he take a pair of glasses out, and he put them on his eyes. And he looked around and he seen a billboard, and the billboard had a whole different picture. It showed an alien, right? And it had a different message, right? And it blew his mind and it scared him at the same time. He took the glasses off a little bit and he looked, and he seen it was a regular billboard, right? So when we decode the movie, and on this level of consciousness, we understand the process now, right? So he went to a black guy, and he just had to share it with somebody. And he go to the black guy and says, "Go put these glasses on." And the black guy was like, "I don't want to put the glasses on." And him and this black guy, man, they got fighting in this alley, and he wound up beating the black guy up and forcing the glasses on. And the black guy, he was just looking around, and that was literally him, like, oh my God, you know, just sometimes it's like that when you reach that level of consciousness, you can see, right? But I'm gonna give you clear warning, right? You have to be very careful in what you see, right? And with that, not so much of what you see, but so much who you tell, how you interpret it, and how you put it out there, right? And I'm gonna give you a story from a famous occultist from England, right? Me, I read everything, and just because I read a person, I don't necessarily agree with everything or subscribe to everything that a person may do, right? Right. So this occultist name was Aleister Crowley, right? And Aleister Crowley I've read many of his works, right? Some of his works is way out there, right? Some of the things I would never attempt, right? But Aleister Crowley has this, I believe, a beautiful story. It's called The Rose Tint Glasses, right? And the story is about a young apprentice who works for a person who makes glasses, right? And after working for this guy for a couple years, he realizes he can make better glasses. He can make better glasses, right? And his whole thing was he believed that the glasses that the glass maker was making wasn't showing full reality. Like when you put it in, the reality was distorted a little bit, right? Now we know it was a metaphor for how people are seeing life, and the glass maker or the person that made the glasses was actually a teacher, right? So he goes into making these pair of glasses. And they had a rose, they didn't have a rose tint at the time, pardon me. And he made these glasses on, and you put these glasses on, man, you see things so crisp and so real. But one of the most prominent things that you can see the nature of people. So this guy, he feels like my job as an apprentice is done. I'm going to go ahead and open my own shop and make my own glasses, and I'm going to sell them, and they're going to be a big hit, right? And he goes and he starts selling the glasses. And after a while, people start complaining about the glasses. They was like, these glasses is not right. They're not showing reality right. And what this actually was were people that were programmed in society to think and see things a certain way. And he was showing them a different way, the ultimate reality, right? And people were rebellion. They called him a charlatan, a fraud, a con artist, an imposter, right? So he wound up selling a pair of these glasses to a police officer, right? The police officer put them on and seen a different reality like everybody else, and he locked his ass up, right? So it was a big thing in this small town, and during the trial was a big thing. I mean, the people were there by the droves, inside the courtroom, out into the streets. You know what I'm saying? And they had a strict judge, and he was sitting on the bench. So all the people came up witness and just smeared his character and all types of things because they couldn't understand the process, right? So the judge says he didn't put a pair of glasses on. The judge just so happened that day he couldn't find a babysitter for his daughter, right? And his daughter, she was in the back room in the chambers, right? So the judge said, we're going to get to the end of this. And he said, I'm going to have my daughter put a pair of these glasses on, right? So he called his daughter out the chamber room. And he says, put these glasses on for daddy. And tell me what you see. The little girl put the glasses on. She said, Daddy, I see monsters. He said, you see monsters? Where? He said, they're sitting right there. She pointed to the people that was in the audience. She looked at the bailiff, seen a monster, right? So, long story is, they wound up still giving the guy a few months of time, right? Even though he wasn't a charlatan. None of that, right? And the moral of the story is rose tint glasses. Even when you see the ultimate truth, you have to be mindful that everybody that you talk to is not ready, or pardon me, everybody that you talk to might not be ready to reach that high level of consciousness to see the ultimate reality. So you have to learn how to administer it to them in different degrees on a level of consciousness, right? And give it a rose tint glass. And I take you back to the Bible when I believe one of the prophets in the New Testament, I believe it's in the book of Revelations, and he was handed this scroll, and he ate this scroll. He said in the mouth it was sweet as honey, but when it got to the stomach, it was bitter, right? And sometimes that's how the truth can make you. But that's one thing that's one thing that's a major test for when you get initiated and when you start imbibing this truth and you start seeing things, right, is not allow it to make you bitter. Because a lot of persecution comes with this truth, right? And sometimes you're going to be doing things and people, they'll be watching you from afar. They'll be studying you, right? And you might do some shit that's look totally outlandish. And they're going to be like, oh man, he's a fraud. Oh man, she's a fraud, right? Even though they don't understand the process and they don't even know what the aim and purpose of why you're doing it, right? And I pull another scripture, right? And we're going to use the Quran, right? And the Quran is one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite surahs out of the Quran, right? In this Surah 18, Al-Kahf, right? Arabic loosely translated as the cave, right? And they have a story about the prophet Musa, which you know as Moses, right? And Moses was on this journey and he came across this being, right? This man. And Moses was already of high levels of consciousness. He was functioning on high frequencies. So high frequencies that his frequency was able to topple a major world power at the time, which was Egypt, right? So Moses had the ability to see the light, tap into the light, right? So he seen a light within inside this being, right? Name is Gadar, right? And he goes up to him with all due humility and humbleness, and he says, I see you a man of light. Can I walk with you on this journey? And Gadar said, sure. He said, but one thing, he gave him strict rules, like, don't ask me. You're going to see me doing some things. Don't question what I do. At the end of our journey, I'll explain it to you. So they got to walk in for a moment, and they come across this, like, lake, right? And they needed to get to the other side, right? So they see an older gentleman. He has a boat. Gadar goes up to him. He says, listen, we're journeymen. We don't have any money. Would you be so kind, right, to give us a ride to the other side? And the man was a good man. You know, he was a working man. He used this boat to make a living. He said, sure. So they get in the boat. The man is in the front of the boat, and he's doing this thing. He's 1-2, he's paddling. And Gadar and Moses is in the back of the boat. Moses noticed something peculiar about Gadar. As they was getting almost like middle or closer to the other side, he started putting a hole in the man's boat. As they got to the shore, the boat started sinking. They were able to get out the boat, pull the boat to the other side. The man, quite sure, he looking at the boat. This is his livelihood. This is how he feeds his family. Can you imagine how distressing the emotional anguish he was feeling at the time? So he goes to repair the boat. And as Moses and them, they go on in their journey, Moses says to Gadar, that man was nice. He gave us a ride. Why would you do something like that? Gadar said, listen, remember what I told you when you first started walking with me? So you don't question nothing that I do? Moses, he knew the man had possession of light. He said, okay. They get to walking. They walk some miles. It's hot. They're tired. They come across a house. They go past, they got a brick wall out front, high brick wall. They go through the threshold. They walk up to the door, they knock on the door. Don't, don't, don't. Old lady comes to the door. She was hostile, truculent, this old nasty old buzzard, right? What do you want? Gadar says, me and my friend here has been traveling for a while, and it would be very kind to you if you could show us some hospitality and give us a little something to eat to nourish the body so we can continue our journey. The lady basically gave them the finger, slammed the door on their ass. So as they was leaving the courtyard, exit back through the threshold, Gadar stopped and looked at the wall, and he noticed at a certain spot on the wall, partial of the wall was folding down. And it was a few hours worth of work to repair it. Gadar tells Moses, come on, let's fix this wall. They fix the wall. And they move on. And Moses, it was irking him. He said, Gadar, man, I mean, the guy was nice to us. Give us a ride. You put a hole in this boat. Old lady was nasty, mean-spirited, disrespectful, and you built their wall. I mean, I know you're a man of light, but yo, this is getting a little too hard to digest. Kadar was stern this time. He said, listen, this is the last time you gonna question me on what I'm doing. The next time you question me, that's gonna be the end of you walking with me and we moving out together. So Moses, even though he didn't quite understand, he said, all right. So they walk and they come to a marketplace, crowded with people, right? And of course, a Muslim, right? And even Jesus said, peace be unto you. So they did the Arabic term. They was part of that lineage. And a little boy, beautiful looking boy. I'm talking about this little boy looked like a model. He walks up to him. Assalamu alaikum. Kadar strikes him in his face. He struck the boy so hard, he disfigured his face. To get out of there. Moses said, all right, listen, I don't care no more. How you moving is crazy. The man, the woman, now the little boy, and he gave you the greetings, peace be upon you, and you ruined his face like that? And Kadar said, well, this is the end of our journey. But before the journey ends, I'm going to tell you why I did everything that I did. He said, the man with the boat, he used that boat to feed his family. That was his livelihood. Which you or the man didn't see because y'all didn't have the foresight and the vision to see a couple miles down. There was a pirate with a ship full of men, and they were seizing all the boats. They would have seized his boat, took his boat, and then he wouldn't be able to sustain himself or his family. So I put a little hole in the boat, so by the time he repairs it, the pirate boat will go by. As for the lady, well, the lady, prior to her in the house, other people occupied the house, and it was family. The parents died. The two children no longer lived. They were orphans. They no longer lived here. They were orphans, though. And they knew at the bottom of that exact point where that wall was falling was a pot of gold. And if I didn't repair that wall, then anybody would have stole their gold before they were old enough to defend themselves and defend their gold. As far as the little boy at the marketplace, that was a trick. That was the Shaitan. That was the devil. That was the Antichrist. And he was going to deceive a lot of people with his beautiful face. So I disfigured his face. So he went and fooled a lot of people. So with that being said, right, that's why you're not supposed to judge people. Because sometimes you could judge people and they could be doing some stuff that really seem crazy to you, but you'll lack understanding because you might not be on that level of consciousness. You may not be on that person's level of frequency, right? And then we're taught that lesson, especially in the Bible. If you study the Acts of some of the prophets and then measure it up with them being righteous men of God, Solomon was a killer. David was a killer. Moses was a killer. Joshua was a killer. Now you might be like, what? They killed for God. Exactly. Just saying where you got hoodlums on the street that kill people, and then you got military men that kill people. So what's the difference? The difference is a level of existence. And if you don't have the ability or the mind to gauge that, then you shouldn't judge. So with that, I just felt inspired just to drop another jewel on y'all. But you know me, I ain't nobody. I'm just a crook with a book. Y'all stay up, though.